Well, hey everybody, it's your good old pal EmptyHero, and tonight, for the third year in a row, we are going to tell some especially spooky and scary Halloween stories that will chill you to the core of your being, or perhaps just the tip of your taint, baby. Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh held his head in either hand as his elbows rested on the bar. All around him he heard people milling about, clinking their drinks, and laughing about what he did not know. Somehow, the longer he stared down at his drink, the louder the cacophony around him sounded. That ever-present laughter grew louder and closer and closer and closer until it was right at the edge of his ear. And as he looked up and said, "Would you please be quiet?" he suddenly realized he was alone in the bar. The lights were out. All of the chairs had been upended and left upon filthy tables. "Must have dozed off," Brett thought aloud, while rubbing his sweaty palm on his forehead. Looking down at his glass, he realized that not only did he have a growing headache, but that he didn't even have a beer to chase it down with, as he waited for an Uber to take him home. Looking around once more, and noting that no one was present, Brett reached over the bar towards a bottle of Samuel Adams Winter Lager. Strangely, he found that he was unable to move it. No matter how hard he tugged, it seemed affixed in place, like a butterfly on a corkboard. He took his empty glass and held it to the spout of a draft beer keg, but the lever would not pull. As though in a fever, he hopped behind the bar and grabbed a bottle of vodka. But the bottle opener built into his belt buckle could not get the cap loose, and in frustration he threw the bottle across the room, where it struck a mirror. However, neither the bottle nor the mirror cracked. Rather, the bottle stood upright against the mirror, as though caught by some invisible hand. Dumbfounded, Brett crawled back over the bar and crossed the room to better study this strange phenomena. When he looked at that mirror and the bottle affixed on it, he could see a multitude of women filing into the room behind him. However, not a murmur, a breath, or a footfall could be discerned, and every time he looked back, only the unattainable bottles that glittered like the backs of cockroaches appeared behind him. An oppressive shadow appeared behind those gibbering figures and pressed them apart with long, spindly fingers. And to Brett's dismay and horror, he recognized that figure. It was the accuser.
"I bet you thought you could get away from me, didn't you, Brett?"
the creature rasped.
"Oh, hey now. We had the FBI look into things, and they said I didn't do anything, and you know I didn't do anything. We both know that only happened in your head. It wasn't real. This isn't real."
And as he tried to spin back to look at his accuser, that eldritchian being reached out and grasped him by the back of the shoulders and pressed his face closer to the glass.
Now listen. There's no reason that we can't get along. Look, we came from the same neighborhood, and we had the same friends and the same hobbies.
I don't care. I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars in television appearances, a book deal, a GoFundMe, let alone the treasure trove of endochrome I've received from the Clinton Foundation. But I'm not done with you yet, Brett. You made a fool of me on TV, what with your insistence on facts and reality. No, it doesn't matter that you didn't actually rape me, because it was real in my mind.
Look, listen. Let's just go back to the bar, and we'll have a drink. It'll be like we're old friends catching up.
Oh no, I've got something special in mind for you, Brett.
As the accuser spoke, one of its long, spindly hands dropped down from Brett's shoulder, traced his shoulder blades like a tailor's piece of chalk, and down the back of his pants, where it curled up and pressed a blackened fingernail against Brett's taint.
What do you think you're doing?
He asked while struggling to turn back, but finding it impossible to do so.
Because of you, I have 2 front doors, and now you will have 2 back doors.
As the accuser rasped, it shot his bony finger up Brett Kavanaugh's taint, piercing his flesh and somewhat stimulating his prostate, but not quite enough to make him come, just enough to make him wonder. But that's not the point.
Your laughter was indelible in my hippocampus. Now my blood and cold clitoris will be indelible in your boy pussy.
A tremendous gelatinous clitoris flopped out of the front of her ill-fitting pantsuit, pierced Supreme Justice Brett Kavanaugh's corduroy pants, making a pleasant kind of sound with every thrust. But it wasn't real! What didn't happen? Why are you doing this to me? Brett screamed as his face pressed against that glass.
My reasoning is beyond all known concepts of good and evil. Your puny mortal mind couldn't even begin to comprehend my true form.
Isn't it because you're a pseudo-intellectual nobody who's never achieved anything, and you just wanted a moment in the sun and someone to pay your credit card bills, and maybe, just maybe for a moment, to feel like you actually were worth something, and not just a gelatinous, fat nobody who would never accomplish anything, because deep down you know that you're just an alcoholic slut who got fucked by everybody she ever met, and her husband was just someone who settled for her, because he was just as big of a loser.
Shut up, you fool! What is money to a being that exists beyond time, beyond space?
So it wasn't a bribe?
No, it wasn't just a bribe. I also got to become the most powerful form of woman known in the universe. A victim!
They found Brett the following morning, lying in a pool of vomit beneath a broken mirror, clutching an empty bottle of vodka. They assumed he had drunk himself to death. However, had they looked a little bit closer, they would have seen deep down, inside the heart of his bottom, there was a taint within him. I mean that literally because his taint got pressed up inside of him, but even deeper still, within the crux of his being, he had learned the greatest lesson of all. It didn't matter whether or not he had actually raped Dr. Christina Ford. It didn't matter that he had never actually met her in his entire life. All that matters was that she thought that a dude who looked like another dude, who was playing a dude, who wasn't even the dude she thought the dude was doing, the dude who did the do-do that did the do had done to her, but that she thought that guy might have done something to her, that he might think of doing a thing she didn't like, which never actually happened because even she said it didn't happen, but the thought that it might have not, could have possibly, maybe did what it did do with the dude who didn't even do it, could have happened, therefore making her a victim and him the big, bad ooga booga. And in a final stroke of genius, the accuser had turned the tables and made the accused the new victim, thereby perpetuating an endless cycle of cosmic horror. Utilizing certain arcane incantations and the blood of unbaptized children harvested from the head of John Podesta's penis, they manifested one at a time in robes within the halls of the House of Sleep. All around them, restless spirits gibbered in their sleep, each mama producing new realities and tears in the fabric of time. Barney? Marshall? Are you boys sure you want to do this? I mean, those circle jerks around the Moloch statue are one thing. Well, this is some serious shit you're looking to get us into. The tallest of the four men spoke. Mr. President, Barney interrupted. Listen to me closely. It's bad enough that the Goyim refused to bring their wives and daughters to the interracial breeding grounds, but the other day, One of them made Jimmy Kimmel cry on TV. The third man interrupted while grabbing the other two by the shoulders. Ayo, I ain't no plumber, but around us they slumber. Something or other, maybe I should battle rap my mother. The other two looked at him as if he was an idiot and turned towards their destination. Within one of these halls is the Eldritchian force which inhabits my wife, the Hillary. If we can awaken it within this house asleep, she'll be at her fullest power on Earth, and so busy taking over the Earth that she'll have no time to stop me from gallivanting around with prostitutes, hairless Indonesian boys, and literally any animal that I can outrun. Pick up, that's sick! You make me want to stroke my dick! Want to make my dick real thick? Because I gotta... I'll think of something later. Marshall interrupted. Bernie slapped him across the face. Bill slapped him across the buttocks and slipped his thumb in and out of his butthole, making a pleasant sound with every thrust. Marshall relaxed, and they initiated their search. On moth-eaten beds, swollen floorboards, and cracked ceiling beams, figures slumbered, shrouded by their own noxious breath and the dust of aeons. We'll never find her at this rate, Bernie said, exasperated, after checking his 30th body and failing to find his mark. Don't you worry, Bernie. I've got a secret weapon, Bill said while retrieving $1 from his pocket. Oh, ancient evil spirit, the godhead from which the all-knowing, all-seeing, all-encompassing evil known as the Hillary issues forth like a restraining order from a fat woman. I have a bribe for you. Awaken. And like a bad haircut that makes you look like a gay Keebler elf, or pants filled with feces at the slightest provocation, this bribe will be yours. All around them, dust poured from open doorways and cracked windows, as though some tremendous being was stirring from its slumber. Bill smiled to Marshall. Marshall smiled to Bernie. Bernie picked a penny off the floor and ate it. They thought they had awakened the entity that powers the earthly manifestation of evil known as the Hillary. Little did they know, they had awakened their comeuppance instead. Behind them, a tremendous arched window went pitch black. The stars that twinkled beyond it died and became black holes. As they stared into this infinity, they smiled, believing they had won. Bernie retrieved his phone to check his online bank statement to see if the bribe he accepted for his participation had cleared. Bill pulled out his phone and began to text a 12-year-old Polynesian prostitute named Jim. And Marshall smiled, hoping that his involvement in this would rekindle his relevance and help him sell another terrible album. Thank goodness we found you, Hillary. Yes, your earthly vessel was running low on energy. Ayo, as the clocks turn, it was your turn. You know what I mean, right? Marshall said. Wrong. A deep, booming voice replied. Excuse me? Bill said, as terror began to creep across his face, pulling his AIDS lesions so tight that they burst and dripped into his herpes sores. Who is it? Bernie asked, exasperated to find that his bribes had in fact not yet cleared. Oh, you know who I am. You've laughed about my existence on Twitter, thinking it only to be a joke, the voice said, with an apparent yet unseen sneer, as only a brief flicker of light appeared beyond the tremendous void. And with every incantation of my name, every snicker, every laugh, you brought me closer to the reality in which you inhabit, and now here I am, ready to shut you down. Oh my God! Jesus, is that you? Bill asked, while shielding his face. It's time! Stephen Colbert! Manifest now and save us! Bernie screamed into his cell phone. It crackled static and sparkled before exploding. Within the dust stood the silhouette of a man who pointed towards the darkness and laughed derisively. Ha ha ha! You don't scare me. I know exactly who you are. Drumpf! Stephen said with a sophisticated jiggle of the neck and wiggle of his disgusting retard ears.
A tremendous, exceptionally manicured and taken care of hand reached out through the archway and grasped Stephen, squeezing him like a stress doll until his eyes bugged out and his head cracked open like an egg.
You think you're real funny, Stephen, don't you?
The booming voice replied as an ice cream scooper descended towards Stephen Colbert's head. No! Anything but that! No! Not 2 scoops! Stephen screamed as the scoop began to remove his brains.
Let's see. 1 scoop for Bill, 1 scoop for Bernie, 1 for Skittles, and 2 for me.
The being said mockingly. Steaming brains fell onto the carpet. Not those scoops! Stephen muttered before falling to the floor dead. Marshall reached within his cloak, revealing some kind of container full of a steaming liquid. Pick! I got this awfully hot coffee pot. You better back up, Drumpf. You can't assault me, Pops, he said while pouring the hot coffee down his pants, hoping to wake himself up and escape from the nightmare he brought upon himself. Wrong. The being bellowed again and flicked Marshall like a booger down the hallway. He collided with slumbering deities who swiped at him with ancient fingers gnarled by time. He stood slowly. Ayo, Donald Blumph. More like Ronald Sclumph. More like Cronald Plumph. More like Fondled Rumps. He groaned, trying to regain his strength. He marched down the hallway defiantly, reaching out towards the tremendous hand of the thing. Marshall, stay back! You can't take him! Bernie said exasperatedly, while reaching for the red pill that would help him to escape from the dream.
A little late for that now, don't you think, Bernie? Can't you see he's already been fired?
The disembodied voice quipped. Down the hallway, Marshall burst into flames and was reduced to ashes, even ashier than Michelle Obama's knees, buttocks, and testicles. Bernie opened his mouth to scream, and a stream of glittering golden coins shot out of the Eldritchian being's palm and into Bernie's mouth, filling him until his clothes began to rip. Bernie pleaded.
What's the matter, Bernie? I thought you enjoyed other people's money.
The creature quipped, just before Bernie exploded, leaving only glittering coins and a bit of schmegma on the ground. Oh my God, Donald, please. You know I never called you Drumpf. We're buddies, right? Remember all those times we went out and grabbed girls by the pussy?
That's right, Bill. I remember. Although, according to you, it must have been really difficult for me.
No, Donald, no. No. It was easy for you. Easy.
'Cause you said I had these little hands!
Bill screamed so loud at all the demons and gods and spirits within the house of sleep burst awake, and had he remained, a fate more terrible than death would have awaited him. But ironically, and according to the Drumpf's tastes, Bill was slapped awake from his slumber by the galactic-sized hands of the Drumpf, and as Bill returned to the waking world, he smiled, thinking he was free of the terrible reach of Eldritchian creatures. Then he looked over and remembered. He was still married to the Hillary! Long ago, to save the world, a young man married a creature known only as the Hillary. But the man did not love the Hillary, nor was the Hillary capable of love. So one night, not so very long ago, this man rose from his bed, peered over his shoulder, and noted that the Hillary was asleep. He reached over the Hillary onto the nightstand where the Hillary kept her satchel of bribes. Smiling to himself, the clever man withdrew a hefty sum for his own use and thought to himself, "Oh boy, I'm gonna call up my buddy Donald. We're gonna go down to Atlantic City and grab some bitches by the pussy." And quietly, ever so carefully out of the room he crept, thinking to himself how clever he was for tricking the slumbering Hillary. But oh, he should have known. The Hillary never sleeps. Our hero stepped outside,
turned down a dirt road and began to skip merrily towards his friend Donald's house. Along the way, he passed an elderly man walking his dog. "Ye better get back into bed, lest the Hillary awakes and finds thee gone," the old man warned. "That dirty old bitch sleeps like the dead," Bill replied with a smile. In the distance, the roof of his friend Donald's house appeared, and Bill began to smile even wider. But then suddenly, a shadow fell over his shoulders. Perhaps it was the wind pushing a cloud across the moon, or perhaps it was the Hillary behind him. To turn back and look would waste the only opportunity he had to flee. So gritting his teeth, he began to run, past a man, past a tree, past a mailbox, to the front door. He tried the knob, pushed through, shut the door behind him. He stood silently, cringing behind that door. He awaited the sound of claws tearing the door apart, of teeth splitting his flesh, of the ear-piercing screams of the Hillary. But he heard only the wind. Bill stood in an anteroom between a den and a library. Dead ahead was a staircase, and to the left of that was a fireplace. "Come on, boy, it's time to get some pussy," our hero called into the darkness. But no reply came. He fumbled around looking for a light switch, but found none. So he headed to the fireplace in search of a lighter. As he fumbled around the mantelpiece, wind blew down the chimney, bringing an ominous sound. The hairs on the back of young William's scrotum stood on end, and across the wind he heard, "Who has my bribe money?" And our hero held his breath. "Who has my bribe money?" The voice inquired again. "Stop fucking around, Trump, this ain't funny," our hero replied. The voice did not sound at all like his friend Donald, but he knew from experience how well the Hillary likes to play with its victims. And should he give up the gambit and reveal that he knows for certain that it's her, he would be dead in an instant. "Who has my bribe money?" the voice called from the roof. Looking up, dust fell upon Bill's shoulders. He heard the clattering of hooves on the roof. Suddenly, a groan sounded from the chimney, and ashes burst throughout the room as the soot cleared from the air. And Bill's eyes adjusted to the darkness. He saw the face of his friend hanging upside down from the chimney. "God damn it, Trump, you had me scared good. Come on, boy, let's go get some pussy," Bill said, certain that everything was fine. But when Donald opened his mouth to speak, the gnarled, clawed fingers of the Hillary split betwixt his teeth. The fingers bent backwards, grasping his chin and face. And in an instant, Donald was pulled inside out through his own anus. "Who has my bribe money?" the Hillary croaked, filling the air with embers. And in that moment, Bill knew that he had to run. He turned back, grabbed the banister, hurried up the stairs, knocked over statues, knocked over china cabinets, opened and shut doors all along the way to throw the Hillary off of his scent. But it was no good, for when he reached his final place of hiding, a hot tub in the baby's nursery, the bribe money gave him away. For on the wind he heard the voice of the Hillary singing, softly, sweetly, "Give me money, me want bribey." And the money in Bill's pockets began to jostle. And sweetly, lovingly, the money replied, "Me be bribey, pay for play." And Bill heard the sound of clattering porcelain, which could only mean that the Hillary was near, and it was smiling. "Give me bribey," it sang. "Pay for play." The money replied, "Give me bribey, pay for play. Give me bribey, pay for play. Give me bribey, pay for play. Give me bribey, pay for play." Bill screamed, "Ah!" and he jumped out of a window, and he threw the money into a lake, and he ran till he thought his lungs would burst, and he looked up at the moon, and the moon was suddenly blotted out. Green ooze dripped onto his chest from the open, gaping mouth of the Hillary. And as Bill stood there, quavering in the dark, he remembered why he had married the Hillary in the first place. He took a deep breath and composed himself and reminded the Hillary, "You'll never become president if I'm dead." And the Hillary shrunk back like a shadow burned away by the sun.
Don't you get it, Bill?
The Hillary rasped.
The checks have cleared. I'm already president.